So we all know because of the pandemic back in March, the governor put through some emergency orders so that certain regulations and statutes can be waived or suspended. And that was number 71, I believe it was, under the emergency number 71. And those are going to expire soon. So Rod is going to bring us up to date on extending that expiration date. I believe it's going to be through September, and how that's really going to affect us. And we're doing this because during the pandemic, it's very difficult for all of us to get together to have a quick vote. There was time sensitive. So there was like a carte blanche executive order stretched to the governor, and obviously through Rod and the office also blessing it. And there's some regulations in there that affect pharmacy. So Rod's going to update us on the extension of these emergency orders and how long we think they're going to last, and whether or not at some point we have the ability to even stop them and just go back to normal if our meetings go back to normal and if life goes back to normal. So saying that, Rod, why don't you fill us in on the extension of these emergency orders? Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, and thank you guys for having this emergency meeting today. It's actually was Executive Order 7L.
7L.
But the L's, they don't, or it was the L or I can't even remember anymore. So many executive orders have been put through, and so many of them affected drug control and pharmacy that it's hard to keep track of them. But ultimately, this executive order gave the commissioner authority to waive certain regulations, which is an authority that the Commission of Pharmacy generally has. And so we did that because at the time we weren't really sure if we were going to have Commission of Pharmacy meetings and how that was going to work. And in doing so, we waived a total of 5 or altered 5 different regulations to allow for the efficient delivery of healthcare and pharmacy practice in our state during that time. And the most recent one we altered was in January of 15. Now, I'll go through them. They're all available on the website as well. In general, it's going to be your authority to waive these. The executive order officially expires on the 19th of this month. And so I will provide some kind of general suggestions, but the duration and whether you waive them for a duration is really up to you guys. My suggestion is that you waive some of these. If you're going to waive any of them, they're waived until the 29th of September, which is a Commission of Pharmacy meeting where you can bring it back up. I think that'll give us all adequate time to assess the state of affairs during the summer and see maybe where the fall is going, what vaccination is going to mean for our state, and what the ongoing role of pharmacy is going to be in vaccination. And so, but again, you guys can make any recommendation that you want, and you can change that for all of them. I think the complexity of having a different date on each one will be harder for all of the industry to manage, but it is indeed your option. So that being said, March 21st was the official date that the executive order went through. On the 27th, the department issued particular guidance documents for these four regulations right away. The first one was the hours of operation of a pharmacy. So generally, a pharmacy has to be open 35 hours a week unless they're previously approved to operate below that. This law eliminated that requirement, understanding that some of these pharmacies the pharmacies at the time were getting exposed probably to COVID-19, and if they had to close, we wanted them to be able to close without repercussion. I think that possibility still exists, and so I would recommend that this one get continued.
Excuse me, Rod.
Yes.
Do you have any feedback on how many pharmacies took advantage of that, or is that a missing data?
So I don't have the data at my fingertips. I don't know how many emails Heather has received. In the guidance, we asked for an email and for information to be posted at the front of a building when that occurred. I recall a handful of them. I think we've been fairly lucky. in our pharmacies.
Yeah,
Not a lot of closings have occurred, but Heather, do you have any idea of who's gone below 35 hours?
there was a few in the very beginning of it, but even now, I think that most of them have come back up to close to or to the full 35 hours.
Okay.
There, like I said, there was a few in the beginning just because they weren't sure with staffing and stuff, but it's just a handful. There's really not a lot.
Okay.
As a matter of process, and this is for all of you, I guess, to decide, would you prefer to vote on them after I speak on them or do them all together at the end?
Well, I think that if we're going to approve something, it may be all encompassing. So let's do them all at the end. And
Okay.
then if we believe we need to carve any out, we'll do that on a motion. What do you think, Rob?
That sounds fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Continue.
Does anyone else have any questions about the hours of operation of a pharmacy? Just for
The only thing I have to say about that is that those are the only ones that were reported to us. There could have been others that weren't open 35-hour weeks that didn't report it, but they knew that they were covered by the executive order. So I think it happened a little bit more than a handful in the beginning. Not to say it's going to happen again, but I thought that there's been more than we think. I think that they use that executive order rule. So go ahead.
Just for the record, that is 20-576-13. That's the regulation. And we only asked them to report when they went below 35 hours.
Right.
The next one is 2576-23. It requires a newly designated pharmacist manager to present before the Commission of Pharmacy. I believe to some degree you guys have resumed doing some of that. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
We have not.
Oh, okay.
We have not right now.
We have not.
So
Yeah.
I actually think that this one could commence at this point and does not need to be continued, but I defer to you on that decision. The next one that we modified was 20-576-33. That's pharmacy technicians in institutional pharmacies. We've allowed that the ratio to expand to up to 4-to-1.
To 4-to-1, you said?
Yeah, 4 pharmacy technicians to 1 pharmacist. And operationally, that just allows the pharmacy to have more flexibility in the COVID time period. And so for the emergency, we thought that was valuable, and we had heard from industry asking for that. And then we did the same for pharmacy technician in licensed pharmacies as well, at 4-to-1.
Does the certification have any impact on that, or they don't need?
We actually, in that one, we say that the at least 2 of the pharmacy technicians should be nationally certified or have at least 5 years of experience.
Okay.
So the concern is that some pharmacies were taking on a lot of new pharmacy technicians in that time period as well, to kind of deal with staffing issues in general. And so we wanted to make sure there was some experience there to assist those pharmacy technicians, because obviously the pharmacist was now being responsible for more people, and we wanted to make sure that public health and safety was still maintained. And then on January 15th, we issued some guidance about from 20-576-8C1, which would allow pharmacists to supervise up to 5 pharmacy interns at one time at a vaccination type event. This was really to allow for vaccinations to be administered by these interns in a way that was safe and effective, but allowed for more volume. Obviously, the training of these interns is a little bit higher than a technician. These people are in pharmacy school. They've gone through vaccination training already, so they should have an idea. And so 5 was the number that seemed to be both safe and effective for those purposes. There are some limitations. The they can't do more than 5 people. There are, it can be 4 technicians or 4 interns and a technician, 3 pharmacy technicians and 2 interns. 5 is the max that people felt comfortable with. And the pharmacist has to be physically present where the intern is, right? And so the concern is you don't want to go too far there, because that pharmacist may be responsible to respond to a medical emergency that the vaccinator, that for the person that's received the vaccine. So 5 seemed to be the comfortable number. So those are the different regs that we'd waived and would ask the board consider to extend. And again, we're recommending extending them to September 29th, and we can take them up at that board meeting as well, or maybe just a little bit beyond that, so that there's some guidance or some lead time for if we're going to not continue these, the pharmacies can adjust.
Just
Brad, one is only in a vaccination scenario alone, right? It's not 5 interns, in the traditional sense of what the interns do.
Right. So it's for the purposes of administration of COVID-19 vaccination.
Yep. Okay.
So just a couple of comments, Rod, and just sitting from afar, with the recall of the J&J vaccine and perhaps other recalls happening, I think there could be pressure on vaccinations this summer. Because the slightest side effect is going to be exaggerated because of how rapid these vaccines came to market. As pharmacists, we probably know that J&J is fine, right? But 6 cases had it recalled and pulled off the shelves. So
well, Angela, I just would hesitate to use the word recall.
Suspended.
It's been paused for further evaluation.
And I apologize, wrong terminology, right? But these types of events can take place. We saw it happen in Europe with AstraZeneca. We see it happening here with J&J. So just my perception on going through the 4 that you described, the hours basically to me is fine. We should expand that. We should extend that to September 29th, because there's a lot of smaller pharmacies. They may only have a pharmacist and a couple of techs. And if one of them does get COVID with contact tracing, the hours may have to be diminished. So I think that one's really a no-brainer to extend until September 29th. The managers, I'm not sure that we can do the managers virtually. I see that as being difficult. I'm more than willing to try that, but have we had any issues with pharmacist managers not appearing before the commission? Because that has always been kind of one of our niches, and I think a good thing that we see them face-to-face live in that setting. And on a virtual setting, I'm not sure how we're going to swear all those pharmacy managers in. I don't know. Do you think it's easy, Heather, or is it going to be cumbersome? That one concerns me a little bit, and I'm more than willing to extend that to September 29th, I guess is my point. And the technicians, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Heather.
I think that with the backlog that we have, it's going to be difficult for virtual.
Yeah, we'd have to discuss on whether or not we just grandfather them all in, or we're going to bring them before the board, the backlog.
Right.
That's going to be something that we really have to discuss as a commission. The technician ratios, I think they're fine, only because I do see increased pressure on pharmacies that vaccinate, particularly the chains that are doing vaccinations, as well as the independents now that have signed up through their wholesalers for those immunization programs, and they're in full swing. So I'm in favor of that. And the intern vaccination, I think, is basically a no-brainer, because I don't think it's not. I just want to be clear. A pharmacist will be overseeing they can oversee up to 5 interns. It's not going to be 5 interns doing vaccinations all at once in a facility, correct? Can they do that?
So yeah, I mean, if they were doing a vaccination event and that was all they were doing, those 5 interns could be immunizing. But I mean, it would obviously, there would be some staggering likely to be occurring. And so patients would be waiting the 15 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the kind of their medical history. But that pharmacist would be there to kind of make sure the dose was appropriate, be watching, these interns and their work. And, I don't know of many clinics that are going on in that particular, using that particular methodology at this time with interns. But I think that should it, and it may start to go on as we move kind of into the next phases of the vaccination effort.
Right.
And as pharmacies become even more relied upon for the ongoing vaccination of patients in our state, it may become something that happens more.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rod. I think maybe now because the interns are still in school, but come summer when they're out of school or off rotation, and you have, 600 patient clinics somewhere, that's very possible.
Yeah, I can speak for Hartford Healthcare. We've been utilizing interns quite a bit, and it's been working out really well.
Super. That's good. That's good to know. So I actually feel comfortable with all of them. The only thing I'll say is that if our face-to-face meeting comes sooner than September 29th, maybe we can revisit maybe we'll certainly revisit the manager. Because if let's say that the governor allows us to meet, or we can meet in June, then we'll resume pharmacy manager in vivo at the commission. And then, so in terms of that one can come off the list once we resume live again. So maybe we'll say through September 29th now, but if we do resume sooner, we can resume our pharmacist managers at that time. But everything else I feel very comfortable with extending through September 29th. I don't know if any other board members have any issues with extending these executive orders through the 29th.
No, I'm comfortable, but I want to go forward to the future. We want to make sure this vaccination can continue. Do we have to codify this, Rod, through regs? I know Steinberg I saw him quoted in the paper the other day. I was hesitant about pharmacists continuing to do this, on a long-term basis, and I took offense to that. But are we going to try to do something to codify that we can go beyond this executive order and do it as part of our profession?
Well, there's two different things that you're kind of combining there. One is not necessarily a regulation or statute. So these regulations are things that we could certainly attempt to edit. The regulation editing process does take some time. I don't know that that all of these would be great candidates for the general day-to-day practice of pharmacy. And that's just generally my opinion about it, but it was something we can discuss more. I think that hours of operation are kind of critical. The public needs to know kind of when pharmacies are going to be there, and that if they're going to get this registration or license with us, that there's an expectation that they're open a certain amount of time, unless it's been individually approved by the board.
And I'm sorry, I was just talking about vaccinations.
Right, and so that's where I was going next. So the next part is right, the vaccination law that allows pharmacists to vaccinate is something that I think needs to be looked at and perhaps updated in certain areas. I think there are some ongoing discussions there. I also believe that the current executive order that gives pharmacists permission is going to be extended again until the legislature can come up to a determination on what the final law should be, and we're hoping to see that by the end of this session. I think that many people realize that there is a critical role for pharmacists in this vaccination effort and kind of our fight against this pandemic. And it's just a matter of saying what exact language people are comfortable with across the board, from some of the pediatric or adolescent vaccination dates to kind of COVID and going on forward. So there's a lot of conversation going on about it, but I don't think we have a distinct answer just yet.
All right, great, thanks.
So Rod, are we looking at any of these, maybe some of the data? So I just look at hours of operation. I 100% agree with you on that. But what about our pharmacy managers going before the board? Have we looked at, are there any issues that they haven't come before the board? So why we have that requirement, what we're looking to get out of it, are we seeing any issues with them not appearing before the board?
So, yeah,
and we look at the ratio and all of those. Are we seeing any challenges to what we had in place before? Because right now we're not doing it. So are we seeing anything? And are we looking at the data?
So, I mean, we're gonna review the data as it comes through. I think, during COVID times, some of these changes, make some very good sense. I think the pharmacist manager one generally has been something that has been done to make sure that those folks have some responsibility. We have done some work with the School of Pharmacy and CPA to create a training course for pharmacy managers, which I think will have a lot of value to supplement this. I think, having pharmacist managers understand what the board is and what it does has value. I mean, I felt it was valuable when I appeared before the board, especially just to understand that this is the board. This is where you come for things to get adjudicated. If you don't do what's responsible of you, and making sure there's an awareness there, I think that's really an important part of what the board does. Having them come on a non-punitive matter is generally a good thing for people, I think. But it's something that we can certainly look at. We're going to assess some of this over time. Once we've kind of gotten through some of these orders to see, are there more errors? Are there more issues that we're having? One of the challenges is it's not like every error is reported to drug control. And there are mechanisms for companies to assess their own errors and do things on their own. And so some of that data isn't necessarily readily attainable to really make those assessments all the time. So those are going to remain challenges if we can't access that data for that purpose, to assess whether 4-to-1 is that much better or worse is always going to be a challenge for us. And so I think we're all going to learn from this. We've learned a lot of things from the pandemic in general, and made a lot of changes to government and pharmacy and all these other things. One of the other things that you've seen us work on is the shared pharmacy services regulations, which we shared with you a few meetings ago, which are getting ready to enter into the regulation pipeline soon. And so those are areas I think where that expansion can really help to make pharmacy more efficient all the time, not just in a pandemic, and allow for other people to access the practice of pharmacy from their home or from other locations. Allow our retailers to be as efficient as possible as they stay open in these times. So I think we've been addressing a lot of things, and that those areas we will continue to assess.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions about them?
There's no further questions. I'd like to make a motion to extend the executive order 7L through September 29th as presented by Rod Marriott. Do I hear a second to my motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Very good, Rod. Thank you.
All right, so just so you know, as a matter of process, I will update the kind of the recommendations from that, and those will be extended, and we'll put them up as an extension of the commission with the expectation that they're going to be brought up again at the 29th meeting to determine if they're going to be continued or not. And then perhaps at that point you can say, all right, as of X date, they're not going to be continued if that's what you guys decide.
And I just want to be very clear, if we do meet in person before September 29th, we can always change and say that the waiver for pharmacist managers not appearing before the board is now revoked, and that pharmacy managers have to appear before the board, right? That's something that we can do if we meet in person sooner than that. Okay. Everything good? Everyone have a lovely rainy
Good.
Thursday. Take care, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
You guys,
Take care. Bye-bye now.
yep, bye.